Welcome to the Synagogue Security Podcast. I'm your host, Carmi Lawrence, Managing Director of the Synagogue Security Council of North America. And this is my co-host, Tzvi Waldman, who is a director with the organization, and he is also the founder of the New York State Gun Club and the United Jewish Gun Coalition, both of which are involved in Second Amendment advocacy on behalf of the Jewish community nationwide. Tzvi, thank you very much for supporting the cause. Thanks for making this happen.
Yep, anything I can do to help you and to help this cause and to help the community being more safe.
Yeah, much appreciated. The Synagogue Security Podcast deals with Jewish communal security topics such as shul security strategies, self-defense, firearms, and Second Amendment issues, and worldwide social and political landscape issues impacting the North American Jewish community. Just a little bit about us. The SSCNA is a 501c3 nonprofit organization, and we are dedicated to providing life-saving skills and technology to committed members of the Jewish community. The objective is to create safer synagogues by cultivating cost-free, capable, and effective volunteer first responders within every minyan. We do this by providing standardized technology systems, real-time intelligence, information, training, and certification programs to community volunteers, giving them with the necessary tools and skills to help prevent and respond to a targeted attack. So for more information, please visit our website, sscna.org. Much more information available about what we do and how we do it. Tzvi, today we have two incredibly special and fascinating guests. I know you're excited, aren't you?
Super excited, and I think we're very honored to be able to have them on board.
Absolutely. Honored to have Greg Williams and Brian Marren from training and consulting firm Arcadia Cognerati. Greg and Brian are human behavior pattern recognition and analysis experts, and they are the world's foremost authority in what we call situational awareness. So a little bit about these two esteemed guests. Greg Williams is a decorated veteran urban law enforcement professional and a former soldier with over 30 years of combined experience and expertise. He has trained just about every Tier 1 Special Forces unit in the Western world and just about every three-letter agency in the United States, including the CIA, the DIA, the FBI, Homeland Security, and all the rest of them. He was the architect of the Marine Corps Combat Hunter Program and the Army's Advanced Situational Awareness Training Program, and much more. The book Left of Bang, which I know you've read, Tzvi, I've read it, and I actually read it before I even knew who Greg Williams was written about his work, and he and Brian have a podcast called Left of Greg, so feel free to check that out on their website at arcadiacognerati.com. That's ARCADIACOGNERATI.com, arcadiacognerati.com.
And I will put a link in the description of the video now and
Oh,
in
great.
the podcast notes.
Thank you. Brian Marren, he is a decorated Marine, a high threat protection security professional, and served as a scout sniper in the Marine Corps with multiple combat deployments in the Middle East. He was a security contractor for the U.S. State Department, and he was an instructor at Camp Pendleton, which is the Marine Corps boot camp. Brian is an expert instructor in human behavior pattern recognition and analysis, and he has traveled the world teaching law enforcement and military forces, as well as private sector organizations. I can't possibly do justice to the bios of these two gentlemen. The depth and the breadth of their experience they bring to this topic is truly world-class. So I will leave it at that. And because we could probably spend the rest of this podcast finishing the rest of their extremely impressive resumes. But anything else to add, Tzvi?
Nah, I just want to say I'm super excited, and I think one of the reasons why I'm super excited about this is because this is the type of training their teachings can be learned and applied by anyone. You don't have to be into firearms. You don't have to be extremely strong, self-defense minded. And a matter of fact, the more of a yenta you are, the better you'll be at these techniques. So let's get this started.
Yeah, I mean, it's all scientifically based, and I know that they teach, everything from Navy SEAL teams to neighborhood watch groups. So that's definitely the truth. You speak the truth, Tzvi. So let's please welcome our esteemed guests, Greg Williams and Brian Marren. Thank you very much, both of you, for taking the time to speak with us on the podcast and to be on to talk about synagogue security issues. Greg and Brian, thank you so much for taking the time to do this today. I really appreciate it.
Thanks for having me on.
Carmi.
Did I miss anything?
Here's the easiest way to do that. We hate long intros and bios. If anybody's interested in what we do, go to arcadiacognerati.com. Our bios are right there on the website as our curriculum vitae. They can check us out. Carmi, you did a great job.
Thank you. And by the way, your bios are also on the Synagogue Security Council website, which is SSCNA.org. Because Greg Williams and Brian Marren are both council advisors for the Synagogue Security Council. And we're very honored to have you on the advisory council. Before I get into that, I just want to explain to our audience a little bit about what the Synagogue Security Council does. So this organization was formed with the objective of having a trained, armed, effective first responder within every minyan, which means that whenever there's any gathering of Jews in any kind of a Jewish institution, whether that's a yeshiva or it's a synagogue or any kind of a school or even a kosher market, doesn't matter. We want to be able to train effective first responders to be able to deal with the type of incident that happened at the Covenant Christian School just a couple of days ago, where a targeted attack on a faith-based institution took place. And because it took the Nashville Police Department 14 minutes to get to the shooter, we had 6 people die. Now, I'm not criticizing the Nashville Police Department. I think they did a wonderful job. I think we all saw the body cam video. I think they did a wonderful job, getting to the scene and through directed violence of action, finding where the killer was and putting him down in an efficient manner. However, 6 people sacrificed their lives, in my opinion, because of that 14-minute gap. And I think what we determined when we organized the Synagogue Security Council was that that gap is unacceptable because that gap is where the body count takes place. So we train first responders. We provide counsel to Jewish communities and synagogues and facilities on not only how to have an effective first responder, but we want to take a layered approach to security. Anybody who's a security practitioner understands that there needs to be more than just a guy with a gun, right? The gun is not the solution. It's just a tool that helps in the overall strategy of having physical security and having situational awareness and having, first responder training, medical, tactical training, stop the bleed training. It has to be part of a comprehensive strategy. And that's what we do in helping the Jewish community put together this kind of comprehensive strategy to minimize the kind of, death and destruction that we saw at that school. With that being said, Greg, Brian, you're not Jewish. You don't have a personal investment in the Jewish community because your kids and your loved ones are not attending synagogues or yeshivas. So why did you decide to, invest your time, your energy, and your resources in, being an advisor for the Synagogue Security Council and helping the Jewish community?
Well, first of all, Carmi, I was under the impression I thought you were going to make us honorary Jews at some point, but I guess we'll still
it's
have
coming.
To
there's a
hopefully earn
test.
that. We have to earn that. Of course.
Yeah,
good.
Yeah, there's a multiple choice test and some other things that have to be done. But yeah,
well,
it's coming.
I'll tell you exactly why. And it was actually a perfect example of why is I got a phone call this morning from someone who's on our advisory board, who's a brilliant guy, and a technologist and businessman and entrepreneur, and not any background in security or safety or anything, but he was obviously concerned enough about what happened in Nashville and called me and said, I'm at my kid's soccer, game the other day, and I'm just looking around and everyone's so down and in just watching it, as we should be as parents, wanting to enjoy their kids learning sport and to play and interact and all this great things that people need to do. And, I just couldn't help but be on edge and be constantly looking around and going, well, I was concerned. So to answer your question a long way, why we would get involved with something like this, because your folks are all part of a community that want to keep themselves safe. And if I can help in any manner, in any way to do that, I would absolutely do that all day long. In fact, if some benevolent person would love to just pay my bills, I would just do this for free and teach as many people as I could. And his concern is I'm a parent as well, so I have that same concern. This is all about community and taking care of one another and making sure we're safe. That crosses any religious boundary. It crosses any cultural or language boundary. That's what everyone wants. So what you're doing and what you're building with the Synagogue Security Council, is exactly that. Is what we want. Is that grassroots, local, community-based organization that could be, because that's the way these things are going to get done. And I went back and I told my friend that same thing. I said, well, what you got to do is you got to get involved with the school and all the other parents, and you got to get together and say, we're not going to let this happen in our backyard. And you can do that in a number of ways, right? With basic safety issues, intervention strategies for at-risk children in the community. You're more likely to help out your neighbor down the street, even though you've never met them, than you are, looking at something, scrolling through your Twitter feed that you're getting upset about, right? So that's the answer. The answer, the solution to all of these problems are starting at that community level. So we took a look. Obviously, we were introduced to you. You explained what we were doing, and of course, Greg and I was instantly in favor of what you're doing. And I'll let Greg tell his side, but that's why I'm involved.
Well, and I would agree. And Carmi, I think you need to understand that Brian and I and Shelley and everybody that's on our side is a very, very small, highly trained community of people that do what we do. Every one of them hates bullies. And this is about bullies. Terrorists are bullies. School shooters are bullies. People that are criminals that take something that's not theirs are bullies. And they lead with fear and intimidation. And that's not fair. So we try to step into communities to even the score. Now, I'll give you an idea of how long we've been wrong as an industry. In the late 1970s, I was at Ferris State University, and I was speaking on a number of topics, and the keynote speaker was somebody that I knew well, and he got up and he said, the day of the martial artist that's also your shooting instructor, your police academy instructor, those days are gone, because we're stepping into this new age. And I think now, all these years later, Carmi, you train in martial arts. Tzvi, you train in martial arts. Brian, you're a martial artist. What happens is good ideas stick around. And the reason people take martial arts is so they never have to use it. The reason you have an alarm on your house is hopefully you never have to answer an alarm at your house. The idea behind buying a gun isn't to be in a hurry to go out there and intervene with your gun. It's so you're not victimized at some point in your life. So the idea of being forming a comprehensive strategy with your community, and what Carmi brought up early on, a layered approach to security. What Brian and I do for a living is manage uncertainty. We try to exploit situations so we can see opportunity and danger more quickly than the average human being. And we know that we can teach that to people, and they don't have to be tier 1 special operators, deltas, door booters, and car rammers. The average person, I get asked all the time, and my stock answer on this, Carmi, is the average person doesn't understand they're responsible for their own personal safety. You are. Not the Synagogue Security Podcast, not Brian and I, not Arcadia. You're responsible for it. So you have to seek out those means, right back to that 1970s Ferris State University with the clueless person saying, oh, you don't have to do those things. Look, if you don't want heart disease, you got to eat better. If you don't want to die from heart disease, you got to start working out. If you don't want to be victimized, you got to learn a strategy. And if your strategy is to play ostrich and hide your head in the sand, we know that's not going to work. So I would rather be an opponent than a victim. And I want to help my fellow man. And the minute that we were introduced to you and we heard what you were doing for synagogues, not just in Chicago, but in New Jersey and New York and all across the country, and that you were trying to offer information as a cure. The answer is information leads to intelligence. That's a way to fight this. The other thing is information leads me to understand that training offers a way out of this situation. And training is just as important as a security strategy. If you took a look at what happened in Nashville, shooting the door to get in, that happened with Adam Lanza how many years ago at Sandy Hook. If you take a look at the shooting of the door, the first people say, one hand, they say, oh, it's a high capacity magazine. The other is, oh, the school should be hardened and there should be a different door, a door that kids maybe can't get out and is not wheelchair capable, but that's okay in this special circumstance. What we have to stop doing is knee-jerk reaction to a training solution. All schools are vulnerable. Why? Because that's what bad guys choose. They choose soft targets. So to harden the target, we don't just harden the facility, we train everybody to be an observer. And that observation starts, for example, for 18 months, the two that did Columbine, Klebold and Harris, 18 months they posted, I am going to get a gun. I'm building pipe bombs. I'm going to go to a place and shoot and kill everybody there, and we don't pay attention. The shooter for Nashville has a manifesto, and we want to see that manifesto, but we also want to keep that under wraps because we don't want somebody else to do it. The broken humans in our society will continue to predate on different organizations, a synagogue, a church, a school, the Jewish community. Why? Because of a perceived grievance that they latch onto that may have no basis in fact whatsoever. So we can't fight them by outthinking them and changing their violent rhetoric. But you know what we can do, Carmi? We can outthink them and start looking further out in their email postings, in their Facebook and social media, which I don't know a lot about, but I do know that it's always there. There's always leakage. In the parking lot while they're circling around, rehearsing what they're about to do. Those are the places where the average person, like everybody listening to your podcast, can intervene and they can make the world safer. They can be a great witness and call 911 and get those officers there on scene before the incident starts to unfold and before we have a body count. So Brian and I work with a very small group of highly trained humans that do one thing. And the one thing that we do is imbue people with the ability to do human behavior pattern recognition, one, and human behavior pattern recognition and analysis, two. And Brian, I'd like to throw it back to you just before we go back to Carmi. Can you explain to the audience what those two things are, where they differ?
Yeah.
The human behavior pattern recognition, vice.
Yeah. So what, human behavior pattern recognition and analysis is, a big, long scientific term for something that everyone listening right now knows how to do, right? And the idea is all human beings set patterns. So if I think, and as a human, we're actually primed to read and understand patterns and then act off of them, right? So if I always think back to when I was a little kid, and if everyone listening or watching, think back to when you were young and you knew, even at a young age, when your mother or father or grandpa or grandma, whoever raised you, when they walked in the room, before they ever said a word, you knew if they were happy, if they're upset, or in my case, I got to go, run and hide because I'm about to catch a whooping for something that I did wrong, right? That's human behavior pattern recognition. So it's sort of ingrained and instilled in us. And if we can do it with the people we know and understand that, we can do it, actually technically do it with any humans, even ones we've never met before. We're wired in a sense to do that. Where we don't get a lot of training in is the analysis. Now, maybe there's some education in that, but then that can go off of, think of every pundit or talking head that's out there. They're going to provide their own analysis, but that may not be science-based, and it's heavily opinion-based, may be dependent on things that don't necessarily matter, right? We love talking about different cultural issues. We love talking about our differences, right? We love talking about and coming up with all these reasons, like motive of why someone would do that. Well, that's great. If you're an analyst, if you're a researcher, maybe you may gain some insight in that, but that information isn't really going to help me identify the next person before they do it. And so that's what we do, is we show people how to identify, like Greg said, danger or opportunity in any environment. And that's our methodology. That's our way of doing things. It's to cut through the extraneous information that's out there and find, what is it that I need to look for? What are the demonstrations of intent that I need to understand from a human being? Because that's going to tell me what they're going to do next. All humans demonstrate their intent. They're going to show you what they're going to do before they ever do it. So if I look for those rather than looking at the color of their skin or the type of clothes they're wearing or the political party they belong to or what religion they are, these things are demonstrations of intent are wired in humans. So if you're looking at a human being or anything touched or influenced by a human being, it'll work.
So that's an interesting point that you made about, working in any environment, and regardless, you're looking at behavior rather than, looking at superficial cues. For instance, like in a synagogue environment, people are looking for these superficial cues, like somebody who doesn't know, it looks like they don't belong based on their idea of who belongs in a synagogue and who doesn't. And that differs from person to person, right? That's a very subjective thing. So, in the Jewish community, the threats are that we're focused on are coming from outside the community. They're not inside the community. We're not focused on mentally unstable within the community, doing violence within the community. It just hasn't been, an issue within the Jewish community. There's so many external threats, though. What we've seen is a coalescing of many different forces from the left and the right. And you've got Islamic terrorism, if you've got domestic neo-Nazi terrorism, and you've got 360-degree threat landscape for the Jewish community at this point in time. So how does your skill set and what you guys teach, how can that apply to, for instance, somebody who is going to a house of worship 2 or 3 times a day because they're a religious Jew, and they have to go to a sensitive place, a soft target, twice a day, 3 times a day, every single day. How can this help in keeping that person safer, or that synagogue safer?
Greg, did
Brian,
you want to? Yeah. Okay. It's unusual.
Yeah, we're both saying it. Yeah, if you would, let's keep that op tempo, Brian. If you start, I think that'll be better, and then I'll fill in.
Yeah. So the idea is, obviously the Jewish community is absolutely no stranger to threats from everywhere. It seems like, with a lot of stuff that comes out, I'm like seeing different groups or conspiracy theories or something coming out going, well, I know where this is going. This ends with blaming the Jewish people for everything. And it's almost become comical in a sense to realize this, or to see this from an outside perspective on how ridiculous it becomes. So you're very much a target, and you're a target for all kinds of reasons, and the motive behind it, they may just have chosen that day, because you're Jewish, I'm going to take out all of my anger and frustration that I have going on here in this life on you, because you're different than me, Carmi, and I can see that by the way you look and dress. And sometimes it is that simple. I mean, obviously it can be much more elaborate and organized than that. But the idea is you're just a walking target. But, what I love about the Jewish people as well is you also have a strong community base, very, very family oriented and very community based. So that alone, it has more leverage than anything else out there. The fact that you get folks like you are out here talking about this and doing this, that raises that level of awareness, right? Those communication pieces and talking to one another and getting a better understanding of what a threat really is versus maybe how it's portrayed in the media or in a movie. That's where the power is, right? The ability to sense, make, and problem solve, and know what is it that I need to look at, right? Because if I try to put myself in your shoes, someone in going someone in your community saying, all right, well, I've got this target on my back at all times. How do I not become hypervigilant? How do I not become paranoid? Because everything could be a threat. Well, that's exactly what we're talking about. So let's understand demonstrations of intent. Let's look at, one of our sayings that we like to use is, most people want their say, not their way. Right. So a lot of people like to talk, this is why social media works so well, because everyone gets to have their say, but very, very few of those people actually want their way. So very few people are actually going to carry out and do what they're saying they're going to do. So I know that. So it's a relatively small amount of people, right, that I actually need to be concerned with. So just by whittling down, getting rid of, everyone wants to find the needle in the haystack. Well, first you got to let's remove as much hay as we possibly can. And those simple ways to look at things of people want their say, not their way. Look for demonstrations of intent versus the way someone is, or what someone's wearing. Look at the way they're behaving within a given context, right? Something seems odd. Well, why does it seem odd? Right? What's normal for the situation you're in, so you can compare to what are they doing that isn't normal in that situation. And I even have it right here. If I'm listening to stuff like this, I've got my yellow pad and my pen of paper, because I can write down what seemed off to me. What was it that I saw? How did it make me feel, and why did I feel that way? So now internally, I'm getting better. I'm making myself a better sensor. But then that allows me to call the professionals. Now I can call you, Carmi, and I can say, here's what I saw. Here's why I thought it was odd. This is what I've seen before in the past, or this is what I expect to see. So now you, as maybe someone who actually has to go and do something, you have a much clearer operational picture on what it is that you need to do. Greg, I'll let you kind of take it from there.
I'm spot on. And if I can dovetail, Carmi, you've known me a long time. I like to tell stories, so I'll tell you a little story. So if you walked around my house on the outside right now, you're not going to get far with what you're wearing, because I've got 4 feet of snow on the flat, and the top probably 2 or 3 inches is hard and crusty. And the minute that you try to step on it, it breaks through, and it's powder all the way down to the deck. And then at the ground level, everything's frozen. So if you would go around to the north side of my home, there's even more snow. It's not getting the sun right now. And you'd notice that I have an access that goes down to a basement window. So if you're in the basement window, you can push the window out and climb to safety. Everybody that's listening knows what I'm talking about. If you build a house, you have to have an exit that goes out. But mine is reinforced, and I had to completely buy a special setup for the window to break out that could take a tremendous amount of weight so somebody couldn't break in. And the reason is not what you think. The reason is because mule deer walking through the snow through my backyard will step on that window and fall all the way through, now be loose in my basement and running around into my washer and dryer in my gym. And you're saying,
wait a second,
wow,
there's mule deer in the North Pole?
Exactly. Mule deer and caribou and elk and antelope and moose. You know that it's a veritable cornucopia of animals right outside my door. So I have to consider not just humans that might want to break in and victimize me, but I have to take issue with snow causing things to break. And the sun, it's 6 degrees this morning. It's going to be 35 degrees in an hour. That temperature change wears on metal, and I get fatigue on rubber, so I have to cover the tires. Why? Because I live in an area where there are extremes. So what's the difference between you and Tzvi that live in an area, a baseline, an environment where there's extremes? You have extreme people that love you, and you have extreme people that hate you. And the average person in your community is just trying to go to the synagogue. They're trying to go to the shul. They're trying to be a pious, wonderful human being that's helping others. And you got people out there that are victimizing them. So you know what you have to do? You have to walk around your house. And instead of considering the mule deer falling through your basement window and running amok through your house, you have to consider, do I have levels of safety and security? Do I have lighting in the right way? Do I have my hedges trimmed back? Do I have a doorbell camera? Have I told somebody, look, pick up my mail, I'm going to be out of town for a couple of weeks? These great ideas that have been around since there's been human communications, Ugluk and Mukhtar said, I'm going to leave the cave. Would you come across and take a look at my stone tools and make sure nobody swipes them? I'm working on a thing called the wheel. It's been around forever. And the best lessons have already been given. I'll give you an example. Tzvi Waldman is one of the greatest guys for OSINT, O-S-I-N-T. OSINT simply stands for open source information. If you follow information, the more information you know about a topic, that builds intelligence. And intelligence means a laser-focused look at a topic that you can action on. You can do things with that new information on steroids. And part of what you can do is conduct predictive analysis. For example, look at the calendar. If the date, what's coming up? You've got Pesach that's coming up, right? Is that going to be a significant date? Have there ever been attacks on that date? Were any Jews ever victimized there? Is it going to increase the traffic flow? Because if there's an increased traffic flow, maybe I'm going to have a hard time parking. If I have a hard time parking, guess who's going to be in that parking lot further away? Somebody that wants to steal my wallet or my car. So everything is a balance, Carmi. And what you have to do is you have to take the pulse. You have to feel the temperature of the area you're going to be operating in. And I would tell everybody the first thing to start is that walk around your house. Then walk around your car. Then walk around your synagogue and your kid's school and where you're going to play soccer. That's how you learn the essence of situational awareness and understand what a baseline is. What's normal today? What's normal tomorrow? And those clinically normal things that repeat themselves become a pattern. Bad guys can't help but buck the pattern because they have to lie or cheat or steal or dress differently. They have to find a way to get close to you or your possessions or your family or your kids or your car. If you can see that, if you can let those scales fall from your eyes and put on a special pair of lenses that cuts through the mist and sees that, that's wonderful because you'll be harder to kill. You'll be safer. You'll be stronger. You'll be faster. And that's what we provide. That's what you provide. That's Carmi and Tzvi provide that to their synagogues. We provide a different layer of that to the people that go to your synagogues. The idea is that you, physician, heal thyself. You, Hippocrates, have to take charge of your own security plan, and we're just going to be here to help you do it.
Right. There's one thing I want to add, and I think it's a great honor to have you as part of this organization. When I talk about security to a lot of people right away jump to the gun. And, you know, the Jewish people are known to have mercy, compassion, and violence is not really a thing that we're good at. And it's a thing we strive away. Usually we are on the receiving end of it. So, but people have to understand, and that's why one of the reasons why, like, we're working on all these projects with you is to take your teachings and bringing it to the masses, is because there's so much that can be done, like before the gun ever has to come out. And
so true, Tzvi.
And as somebody who, you know, who understands the compassion, understands these type of stuff, you know, it's the last thing you want to do. And people have to understand that security is not about the gun. The gun is a tool that is, if everything else fails, that's the solution. It's like the fire extinguisher, right? People are not going to cook unconsciously and just create a muck with their oil and everything all over the place, because you don't want to get to the point there's a fire. But if there's a fire, you know, you'll grab the fire extinguisher. Same thing here. There's so much that can be done in the security. And also as the Jewish people, being conscious about things throughout the day is kind of in our DNA. Mm-hmm. We have all the mitzvahs, all the things we have to do. We have to do things in a particular way. And in the way we interact with one another, like from a compassionate perspective, so automatically it puts our conscious at a level that's a bit more alert than somebody who just goes about their day. Every time before we need to eat something, we need to make sure it's kosher. We live in a community, we know already which stores we go into, what's kosher, but it's a thing that's subconsciously. The same way we learned all these things, we can learn to pick up other cues around us. And absolutely. I think that's something that the people in my community are going to really love, and they'll really have an understanding to it.
Yeah,
Tzvi, I would add this, Carmi, if I can just interject one thing to Tzvi's comment. Folks that are listening, He's talking about a fire extinguisher. What's before that? The fire alarm. What's before that? Noticing the newspapers in front of your water tank at home, and hey, they might be too close to the pilot light. So you're exactly right. You build in layers before the fire, so the fire is only an emergency that may surprise you if you're in another person's home. But in your home, you're ready for the fire. You've rehearsed a fire drill. You've gone through those things. And that, you have to think of the synagogue in your Jewish community as a home, and you all happen to live in the same home. So if everybody works together, you're not going to allow the situation to unfold that's going to allow that fire. That's a very great point. Sorry, Carmi.
No, that's you know, I guess in fire safety they would call that what, like your regular fire inspection, your safety inspection, you know, just making sure that everything is good. But what I was going to ask you, Greg, is, okay, so your training allows people to take observations and turn that into actionable information. It's information that's actionable. Do you train people what that action should be?
Yeah, because absolutely. So here's what we don't do, Carmi, and that's a perfect question. It's a loaded question, we call it. Brian and I, in our organization, Arcadia Cognerati, does not teach TTPs. TTPs mean tactics, techniques, and procedures. There are people out there to teach you a headlock, or how to run and hide, or to shoot back, or to use a club or some spray, or how to put the club lock on your car. We don't do that. What we do is we change your mindset. The most important thing that our training does is it changes your behavior. And Tzvi touched on this. If you're already looking for things that are kosher, and we just go to the surface level and say that person leaning on my car when I'm coming out into the dark parking lot isn't kosher, then we know we've encountered an anomaly. An anomaly is something that's either in the situation that shouldn't be there, or was there every single day and today it's missing. So I come in and all of a sudden I notice somebody's luggage that's in the entryway to the restaurant I'm going into. But I don't see anybody standing around, and I'm nowhere near the airport, and there's no bus terminal or taxi stand close by. That luggage is interesting to me. And why is it here where I have to walk in and out of this restaurant? So I have to investigate that. I have to get some distance from that and look at it. Why? Because it's an anomaly in that baseline. Now, every single day that I've gone to this restaurant, there's luggage up in front. You know why? Because it's on the way to the cab and the taxi stand that's going to take you to the airport. And people just want to run in and eat, and there's not enough room inside to eat and bring your luggage. So they actually have a person that peeks out once in a while to make sure your luggage is safe. But guess what, Carmi? Today I showed up and there's no luggage out there. Is the restaurant closed? Is the airport closed? Is there something? Everything in our environment speaks to us if we listen. Everything will look good or bad if we open our eyes. But that's the key, isn't it? The key is, you know, the old adage, I can take the horse to water, but I can't make him drink. Well, Brian and I sometimes have to get behind the horse, twist the tail up a little bit and push and lean the head down, because most people don't think it's ever going to happen to them. Well, I have the confidence and the competence to know that it's not going to happen to me, because I'm constantly aware of my surroundings and looking for those cues. We teach cues. We teach you those cues that lead a rational human to believe, the scientific clues, artifacts and evidence, we like to call it, that danger or opportunity is right in front of you. Stop, look, listen. It might be a very good thing that's about to happen or a very bad thing, but you'll know it first.
So there's challenges within the Jewish community about, approaches to security like there is in any community, especially faith-based communities. One of the challenges would be there are a lot of houses of worship, a lot of synagogue institutions that feel like that they have to have an unlocked door to allow people, open access to the building when they're operating because of whatever philosophical, ideological, religious reasons. So in that situation, you're letting the fox into the hen house, and then, your skills can obviously, the skills that you teach would allow us to identify that there's a fox, but you're kind of already behind the 8 ball at that point because they're already there. They're inside. So wouldn't it make sense to push that out a little bit further and have a locked door and have somebody observing outside the door to, take those same skills and push it outside the building? And, the response to those two different types of scenarios is going to be very different, isn't it?
So you bring up an excellent point of exactly what we do, and is try to give you the gift of time and distance. And time and distance is always going to be your friend. So like, again, because we don't teach those TTPs like Greg was talking about, if that's your policy that, hey, we have an open door here, I love that. And we all want to be able to live in a world where you can do that. But just have to take into account that not everyone coming in is going to be doing the right thing. So how do I get some more time and distance? And actually, Greg and I just talked about this at length. I think it'll be out next week with the with our podcast on parking lots. And we mean it in a literal and metaphorical sense, but everything that happens before before the attack, before something catastrophic is going to happen in a parking lot. Meaning, you just look at what the shooter in Nashville, she had to drive up, they'd park in the parking lot, get out with a bunch of guns, and walk into the school. So you have that time and distance built in right there. And I want to make that as far away as I can, right? As much in there as I possibly can. But that parking lot, I mean, everything happens in a parking lot. If you're off of an exit, off of a major two interstates coming together, and there's an exit there, and there's like a Home Depot or a Walmart or a Lowe's, one of those, there's a drug deal going down in that parking lot at some point. I mean, that's just how that stuff works, because that's how drug distributors get their stuff across the United States. So it all.
Yeah, I think Greg sent a memo out recently how, only cops and criminals exist at, Walmart parking lots overnight, regardless of where you are.
So that's the thing is, if I don't look at it when they're inside or this person comes up, let's get some time and distance in there. Let's get some standoff. I mean, just think about it in general life. Like there's plenty of times in life where I wish I had another second or minute or day to think about something before I made a decision, right? So if I think about how do I get as much time and distance between myself, my community, and a potential threat, that's the ideal situation. So that's why we love it when people are outside or they're greeting people as they come up. The best security experts in the world that I've ever met has always been, it's like the elderly woman who works at the front desk at an organization we're working at. Why? Because she looks everyone that walks in there, she greets everyone, she knows the temperature, the feeling, or the mood of that whole area. And I can walk up to her and she's going to know more than their director of security who has 30 years experience in this and another 20 in that. Why? Because she's in it every day and she's reading that environment. And that's good from two perspectives. It's a safety perspective, obviously, like Greg was talking about, danger, but opportunity, customer service, customer relations. I mean, it's the same skill set. I mean, I make the joke, one week I was teaching a Navy SEAL special reconnaissance team, and then 2 weeks later I was teaching a group of school teachers, and everyone's like, well, that must have been a very different course. And I was like, no, not really. We used a lot of the same material. Now, the application of the skill set is going to be very different in those situations. But the idea is it's just a human skill set. So having that time and distance, allowing people to figure out the situation outside the synagogue before they ever make it in. That's the goal. Am I right there, Greg?
Yeah, you're spot on, Brian. And I would add this. I would say the Synagogue Security Council in North America, one of the reasons that we joined in the capacity we joined is you're proactive. Carmi and Tzvi behind the scenes are working with Motorola to put together an incredible film that's going to be coming out this summer. Folks, just go to the site and learn more about it. Reach out to Carmi and find out how you can help. The idea is the knowledge bombs that are getting dropped on this podcast can save a life. So over coffee today or tea or when you're walking down the street, look around and talk to people about this. But don't think you can do it all on your own. We offer a lot of free training. SSCNA offers a lot of free training. Some of it costs money. But you know what? To lose pounds, you got to give up something. You got to give up a food and start climbing more stairs. So there's always the trade-off. But I'd love to talk about something that you brought up, Carmi, and that Brian was talking about. Let's talk about that locked door for a minute. So if you have a swanky hotel and you have a cool ashtray and nobody smokes anymore, but you're old enough to remember what an ashtray was. And that ashtray's got a wonderful logo on it. Don't come tell me that loss prevention said we got to buy more ashtrays because they all got stolen. That's because you got the open door policy and nobody's checking on the way out. We tell a lot of places you're going to stop that insider threat to check people on the way out at the end of the day, right? People don't think about that. People don't think that when they go to the bar and they see the bowl of nuts that are on the counter, that the bar nuts are open for everybody's hand to dip into before they eat. So if you want to talk about something that's unsanitary and not kosher, that's probably a place to start. So then let's talk about the free finger foods when you go to the next open house, either at school or when you're going for real estate ventures. And sometimes they put the canopies of the finger foods out. You have to understand, if you have an open door, you're bringing in almost everybody that wants to follow the rules, and they're not going to act up, and they're certainly not going to act out. But by leaving that door unlocked, you have to also understand that 1 in a million, 1 in a billion, 1 in a trillion people are going to come in that day, and they're going to think of acting out, not just acting up. So your security plan has to start way out. Your security plan has to imagine that person at breakfast that morning, or that person getting wound up over the news, or losing a significant other and saying, well, I have nothing to live for. Now I'm putting on that bomb vest. And it's not just the Jewish community. We know that synagogues and we know that mosques are targets. We know that Christian schools are targets, and so are non-secular or secular soft targets. The idea is, once you open the door to your house and you say, come on in, or you put the welcome mat out, sometimes you bring that stray cat in, and stray cat's going to poop on your carpet. So what you do is you look at where you are and you draw a circle around it. And you say, okay, this arm span where I could reach and spin around and smack people, okay, nobody comes in that without me allowing them in there. Now what you do is you run for 5 seconds and you create another circle at that 5-second mark, a much broader circle. And you go, okay, nobody's going to leave their bag here because there could be a bomb in that bag and it would hurt me at this distance. Then you run a little bit further and you say, okay, here's my next concentric circle, and this is bicycles, because somebody doing me harm could park a bicycle full of a bomb component and do a lot of damage to me. And then I'm going to run even further and go, you see those windows up there? Maybe somebody could shoot down at me or throw something or drop or film me surreptitiously. So I'm going to have some sort of security there. And then I go to the parking lot. Then I go across the street and sit in a coffee shop, and I take a look at the synagogue and I go, wow, I didn't notice that dark spot before. I didn't notice where somebody could conceal themselves. What it is instead of paranoia, you make it a game. You turn it into a game and you say there's seams and gaps. And those seams and gaps have to be filled with light or knowledge or power or eyes or ears. And once you do that, Carmi, guess what? Now those fibers start coming together and you notice things you didn't notice before. Hey, that car's been parked there a long time. Yeah, but there's always cars there. Yeah, but this one's running. Yeah, but that's not unusual. Yeah, but this one's got the window open on the synagogue side. It doesn't matter what the conditions are. What you want to do is play explanatory storylines in your head to find the things that should or tend to belong. And guess what happens when you do that game, Carmi? The things that don't belong start to stick out. So they're talking about the shooter in Nashville, and somebody's bringing up the clothing and they're saying, oh, look at the clothing. Okay, I'll tell you what I see from the clothing. A very organized person. Did you see the length of the cuffs and how they were ironed on the pants? Nobody else is talking about that. You know why they're not talking about it? Because they don't know what I'm talking about. What I'm talking about is that female chose those pants. She ironed those pants. She measured the cuffs to make sure that they're even. That means that it's a low sophisticated, high organized human being. Does that mean she's going to make a lot of mistakes? That she's going to do a lot of things wrong? Not in her planning. So that's why you got now a soft target with a person like that that's primed to do. Do you think she drove around with both of those guns slung over her neck in that manner? No, she had to park somewhere, get out, and put the two weapons in the configuration that she trained. And she also had a tactical vest. Whether the tactical vest was a fishing vest she bought at Walmart, it was the intent. how she used the vest. So what we have to do is we have to size up everything. The car that's backed in rather than being pulled in. The car that has come around the block 3 times now. The person that's come up and asked a bunch of inane questions that don't fit the scenario. And each time you say, no, this is probably not for you, but they keep coming back. Now, look, a lot of that is innocent people that have mental challenges perhaps, or they're lonely or they're homeless and they want to try to get $1 from you. So not everything is going to lead down that path to be deadly or dangerous. But one time it could. And that's the time you bank for. That's why you're taking those lessons. That's why you're learning how to use a weapon or less than lethal force. That's why you're conducting those studies and walking around. And if you have time to stop and walk into the shul in the morning, then you have time to go a little bit early and walk around the parking lot before you go in. If you have time to go to your favorite kosher deli and get a sandwich for lunch, then you have time to park at a different place every day and walk in and look, smell, and hear what it feels like that day. And if the atmospherics are off, Carmi, don't go. That's your job. Your job as a good citizen and a member of the community is to work harder to make sure that the person that can't or won't look out for the Jewish community, that you're going to take that slack. And that's what Brian and I teach too. We teach interlocking fields of fire in a military standpoint, where everything, your optics and your comms, your communications, and your observation skills and how you listen to your environment, that they're tied in, So I can call and I can say, Tzvi, it feels off today. What's going on? And Tzvi tells me, oh, we're using a different entrance because the plumbing broke. Or Tzvi says, no, I didn't notice it, but now I'm going to notice it. Those are the things that you have to do in your community. And Carmi, you're not going to get that from an hour-long podcast. You'll get motivated, yeah? Hopefully we'll motivate somebody to take training, but you're not going to learn everything you need to know in an hour. And if I might add back to the fair estate, I will give you this example. Organizations that are security organizations go out and hire retired cops. And that retired cop might be a 35-year vet with a chief of police and used to be assistant chief and used to be this and that and the other. And they may have all kind of certificates of training. But you get what you get. You get the librarian that you get. You get the 7-Eleven clerk that you get. And even though those well-touted experts that are out there that have that resume, they may only be one slide deep, Carmi. They may never have been involved at ground zero with an emergency in their entire life. And we encounter that sometimes. Sometimes a person will contact us and they have a tremendous website and a great logo and all of these other things. And you dig into it and they were in the military for a year or 4 years or whatever. And you go, okay, how does that qualify you as an expert on school security, right? So you have to do your diligence and look deeper. You have to scrape that cover a little bit and see what the experience level of the people that you're taking that course from or reading that book.
That's part of the reason why we formed the organization. As you know, one of the challenges that we have in the Jewish community, and I'm, now that you brought it up, I'm interested in your feeling on it. I think that there are a number of organizations out there, we call them legacy organizations, that have been around for a long time. They've raised a lot of money, and they characterize themselves as the Jewish communal security organization. Like, there is no Jewish community in North America. Like, how you define the Jewish community, it's lots of different people with different belief systems, that have different definitions of even what a Jew is. So to say, you're the official organization of the Jewish community is just a ridiculous statement to begin with. But the way these organizations have operated over the past couple of decades is to take people like you just characterized, Greg, people from the FBI and Homeland Security, and when you dig into their operational background, they have never had the skill set of having to protect an institution, against a terrorist attack. They might have investigated things in the federal government. They might have, been involved in, maybe emergencies, responding to, calls, as a police officer, but they've never had a formal skill set in actually identifying weaknesses in institutional facilities and how to create a layered approach to protecting the people inside. And the problem is that when these organizations are out there saying we're the be all end all of protection for the community, and it gets more and more difficult to identify the value that they're actually providing for the security of the Jewish community, sometimes we start to think they're doing more harm than good. So because the attitude of the leadership in those organizations is kind of like, hey, leave it to the professionals. Yeah. We got you covered. Don't worry about it. We're handling it. And it's like, so, does that create a false sense of security within the community to say, oh, well, we have this organization, they're on it. They know who all the anti-Semites are, and they'll let us know if something needs to be paid attention to.
That's the thing, is there is no Jack Bauer. Remember the show 24?
Yes, I love it.
Ticking clock going down, and you got the one guy that's going to do everything. It's just not real. And so that's part of the issue when we see folks with their security plans. They do that. Well, we've got this guy over here or this girl over here, or we hired this company. They take care of that. It's like, well, no, it has to be part of your culture. It has to be part of who you are and what you do. Maybe you need that for a specific purpose. Like, we need to hire this company because they have licensed armed guards and we need that. That's fine. And do that. But even with them, you have to make them part of the team. Everyone has to know who they are. They have to be part of your group and your community. So there's no seams and gaps in there, because once we relegate it to someone else, we no longer take responsibility for it. And even if that person, look, there's people out there that are extremely overqualified even for those roles that I see them doing. And they're the baddest, most, the smartest, toughest, strongest people on the face of the earth. They can't be everywhere at once. Like, just because, they're, on security at a place, they can't be, that's the day it's going to happen, is the day that person had to, had an emergency doctor appointment that they had to go to, or they're in the bathroom when this is going on. Normal things that come up. And if you're relying on that single point of failure, then it's more likely to fail. If you make it part of the fabric of who you are, because those people may need to come in and they say, oh, you know what, you got to move your cameras here and you need to have a person here and and that's great. Perfect. Take their advice and then work that into everything else that you do.
Yeah. And Carmi,
go ahead,
in my career, part of my career as an undersheriff, part of my career as a chief of police, I can tell you that my day-to-day operations were from the strategic level. I was worried about financial concerns and damage to vehicles and who was going to repay and amortization about police equipment. Okay. I wasn't thinking of running on that domestic call. That wasn't my job. So having 35 years experience at that highest level without having ever been in the operational layer or the tactical level, that scares me. And what I mean by that is, we sometimes value things that have nothing to do with outcomes. So I'll depose Brian for just a question. Brian, spontaneously, I'm going to ask you just two questions. So number one question, Brian, is there a profile of a school shooter?
No.
Okay. So if I was out there touting that I could give you the profile or the breakdown of a school shooter, would I be being truthful?
No.
Okay. Now, Brian's the single most experienced person that I work with every day on these topics. And nowhere in Brian's resume does it say expert in school shootings. You know what we're experts in? Fellow humans. And there is no, you're going to say, well, there's patterns. Yeah, there's patterns. You go in the door and start shooting people. You go to a place that you probably have been to before because you're more familiar. I use a gun with a high capacity because, you know what, if you stop the reload, somebody might tackle you. Okay, those type of things. You wear a vest. Why you wear a vest? Well, when I go fishing, I wear a vest so I can carry all my stuff and I don't have to keep running back to the car. The obvious needs to be your going in proposition. And that's why we partnered with SSCNA, because you guys are transparent and you're obvious and your message is, let's get this information out there. Let's help people, but let's vet it first. You've gone through people. I guarantee as an organization, you had people, they started out and they're no longer with your organization because that vetting process showed that they weren't right. There's recipe ingredients we no longer put in our food anymore because it's a little too spicy when we get older. Or guess what? I have a hard time, not doing bathroom breaks when I do this thing, like me with my coffee during the podcast. I'm always looking for a bio break. The idea is you've got to find a system that works every day, every time for everybody, from the kids in your community to the oldest people in your community, from the most pious in your community to the laissez-faire that just happen to be around for whatever reason. And you have to be consistent. If you're not consistent and you only chime in when there's a school shooting, then I call you a charlatan. It's all parlor tricks, and all you're trying to do is make money. Carmi, have you ever paid Brian and I a cent for anything that we produce?
Not in U.S. dollars. I may have transferred a couple of rupees. I think a couple
Never.
of thousand rupees.
Never, folks. And if you know,
You didn't
Carmi,
get that?
Carmi is so tight he squeaks when it comes to giving that. Okay, but you know why, Carmi? You know why we still hang around with you? Because you're a smart man and you're thinking about the best in your community every day. So that's my first going in. I want to go in as a white belt. I want to look around and I want to see what the motivation of these folks is. I want to take a look at SSCNA from the outside looking in and see who they're friends with. I want to see the types of information that they're putting out there. And Carmi, if that day changes when you're not doing that, Brian and I won't be a member. Brian and I have failed at every single thing we've done in our lives. Look at Brian's wrecked and crashed relationships over the last 25 or 30 years. But you know what we're really, really good at? This one thing. So we stick to this. And I'm not going to tell Tzvi what car to buy. And I'm not going to tell you where to go to lunch because I'm not an expert in that. I stay in my lane. But in this lane, what you have to do is you have to seek out the smartest people that you know, and you have to keep going back to them. And that's why I brought up the Motorola, the whole idea of the video training and webinars and all those other things. Is SSCNA isn't just talking heads. There's information there. You can get information, and it's not just a brochure, it's training. And that's the difference, because education about a topic isn't training. Training means you're going to sweat a little bit. You're going to pay a little bit. You're going to go a little bit. It's going to take a little bit of time, but you're going to be better. I don't want to get Brian started, but there's no 10,000 hours that are going to make you a better human. It takes your whole life. It takes from the time you're born and they cut the cord all the way till the time you die. And every single day you got to wake up thinking of your own safety and security.
Right.
You're talking like a Jew now.
Yeah. Thank you.
One thing, right. So there's one thing I want to add. So I had originally questioned how to go about certain situation. I think you answered it. So I'll just for the sake of the audience, I'll explain to everybody, and you'll have a little better understanding of what we're doing, why we're doing it. So one of the challenges that Synagogue has is that, especially in the Orthodox community from where I live, is there are a lot of small synagogues made out of 30, 40 people, especially they pop up on the weekends. And there's not a lot of funding, and there's not a lot of structure to it. So I'm always thinking of ways, how do you secure such a thing, right? So
that's a great question. It's such a great question. And let me throw this at you before you finish your question. There's 18,000 police departments, and very few of those departments are as big as Detroit, Philadelphia, New York, San Francisco, LA, right? So it's the same issue. If that small group gets together and forms a larger community and does regional training, regional training is
what I'm getting at. So what I realized is when you say that when the concentric circles around the synagogue, right? The 50 feet, the parking lot, the outer perimeter.
Yes.
So I think, and this is what we're working towards, is we cannot look at the synagogue as a self-contained issue. It's not the synagogue, it's the community. So if there's somebody coming into our neighborhood looking to do harm, we are set up to identify him before he ever gets close to a synagogue.
That's your job. And protocols. You know, the only thing I'll disagree, when I was making my example, folks at home, please don't think it's 50 feet or 13 feet or 11 feet. Everything is context dependent. So think of it as a rock dropping into the pond. The ripples are going out. How would you measure those ripples? Those waves that are coming out is what you got to pay attention to, Tzvi. You're exactly right. And knowledge is power, right? So you can predict the weather, can't you? And you predict it with great degree of certainty that we can stop sometimes dangerous weather from killing somebody. Well, you can sometimes stop dangerous people from killing somebody too.
So this is exactly why we are working on not only training individual synagogues, but as a community of a whole. And these organizations that are out there protecting, they should also be aware, and they will be aware of what to look for. So it's not just each synagogue is connected, is protecting on its own. It's a community as a whole. It adds another layer of protection, basically.
Yeah,
No,
which is
that's
something
spot
that,
on.
that nobody's
Exactly.
really doing.
Right.
Well,
Right. Well, and listen, it's not that they're not well intentioned. Let's bring that up because one of the things is that we run into people that think they're doing the right thing sometimes, and it might not be right for everyone. There's no one answer that fits everybody and fits everybody in the environment. There is the one answer that science is good. Okay, I know I don't have to learn the German laws of gravity or the Japanese laws of mathematics. It's universal. So let's stick with those universal things. And it also doesn't have to be hugely expensive, Carmi. This can be a layered solution that takes just a little investment. And sometimes for your community, it can be the investment of sweat equity. You can just get out and help, show with your feet.
Yeah. Yeah, one of the protests that we get with the greeter screener training that we do, as you know, which is encouraging people to have somebody at the locked door that can, be utilizing this kind of information that you guys teach to screen people as they're coming into the facility, is that, well, are they at a higher risk? And, my response to them is, well, if you're inside the shul and that person comes inside, you still have to do the same thing. So the question is, do you want to be you at risk by yourself, or would you like everybody that's in the shul to be at risk? But people, right, they don't like to hear that answer, because then it's like, okay, well, I'm a volunteer, so you want me to take the risk? It's like, all right, well, listen, somebody's got to step up and say, listen, security is everybody's responsibility, and we can all help out no matter where we're at. But, we do need to create these layers so that, we're not in the middle of a Torah service, with, people 360 degrees around us, innocents, in the middle of, fecal matter hitting the oscillating fan. Right. And so, I don't know, have you, run into that kind of protest with civilians or volunteer organizations that take your training?
Yeah, I mean, someone has to step up and do it.
Exactly.
There's nothing else to say. I mean, what would you rather have? One person in your community killed, or 20 people in your community? I mean, I this is extreme examples I'm giving, but someone has to do it. That's part of the job.
And Carmi, Brian's got young kids. My kids are in their 40s. Okay. Tzvi has newborns, and so do you, Carmi. The idea is me. I'll step up. I'll be the first to do it. And I'm not going to do it while I'm holding my baby. So I'm either going to have to hand somebody that baby and step away to handle that situation, okay? Or I'm going to have to just be a good witness, and this time I'm going to sit it out. That's okay. But you know what? You don't know how you're going to respond in that situation unless you what? Unless you tabletop it, unless you conduct a practical application and you conduct a rehearsal. And that's what Brian and I are talking about. Knowledge is power. Training changes behavior. And if you're not doing training for the event, don't come to us later and say, hey, we had all of these deaths. That's the tail of the tape, sadly, in this modern environment.
Yeah, that's a great point. I mean, I think the bottom line is society has to face the reality that the police cannot be everywhere at all times. And even if they could be everywhere at all times, that doesn't mean they're going to do the right thing. It doesn't mean they're going to do what they do efficiently or effectively. So I think the only way, in my opinion, which is part of the reason why Tzvi and I and everybody that's involved in SSCNA came together and coalesced around this effort, is that the only way we're going to prevent, these massacres from happening, like we saw in the Tree of Life Synagogue in Philadelphia, where we had Holocaust survivors that were gunned down by a Jew hater because, somebody not only did they leave their door unlocked, but when they heard gunshots, they all hid underneath, desks and pews. And so when the gunmen came in, they were sitting targets. So how do we prevent something like that from happening again? Well, we need somebody that's, on the front line. We need somebody that is identifying threats and responding appropriately, even before, 911 is called, even before that, emergency pull handle or that panic button is pushed. We need to get ahead of it. We need to get way left of that bang, so to speak. And you guys are on the front lines of what that's all about. And I really appreciate all your time, your effort, your know-how, sharing it with this community, because, I think you recognize that, we're not a fundraising organization. We're not in this for the money. Nobody here is in it for the money.
Exactly.
We're doing it for the community.
Exactly.
We're doing it to save lives. I think Motorola sees that, and they're partnering with us because they see that that's what we're trying to do, and they have technology that can help save lives. So I think that when you have good ideas and good people that are in it for the right reasons, I think you're going to be successful. And God willing, we are going to be very successful. We have been successful, and I think we're going to continue to be successful with the help of, good people like you and Brian and Tzvi and everybody else that's been helping us. It's just been humbling for me to see how, the caliber of people that have been willing to coalesce around this effort. So I thank both of you gentlemen for your time and your effort on this, from the bottom of my heart, and, on behalf of the Jewish community of North America. Not that I'm any kind of a spokesman, but I look like a spokesman anyway.
You do.
You sure do.
I spent a lot of time.
That's half of it.
Yeah.
I spent a lot of time on combing this beard this morning, just so I could say that with, some kind of authenticity. But really appreciate everything. Tzvi, did I miss anything? You're muted.
Sorry about that. No, I think this is great, and this is information that the community can definitely need. I think it's something that it's easy to learn. It's not that complicated. We're already in tune to a lot of these things, and I'm looking forward for a lot of the exciting projects we are working on.
Yeah, Greg and Brian, would you give us the honor of coming back again and doing another podcast with us? I definitely see we could do.
That's what I was thinking, is that we can dive into some of this and get some specific examples and find out what the concerns are from your audience, from your listeners, from the community, to say, hey, ask them about this. And that would be great, because then we can get in exactly what their concerns are and we'll address them. And that's that's a big part of the issue. So we would absolutely love to do that and be honored to.
That'd be great. I'd love to have you guys back. I think there's many more interesting conversations we could have about this and many other topics. So thank you very much for your time. Tzvi, thank you very much for your production expertise and helping to put this together. And we will see you next time, folks. Thanks for listening to the Synagogue Security Podcast.
One more thing. If anybody has any questions, specific questions, is there an email address they should email? And we'll try to get an answer on the next one.
Yeah, great. So anybody feel free to come fill out any contact forms on our website, SSCNA.org. And then we also have an email address. You can send emails directly to SSCNA@SSCNA.org. If that's not easy enough to remember, I don't know how to make it any easier. But feel free to contact us.
And no Bitcoin. Just tell them that right up front.
No anti-Semitic hate mail allowed. So
Not interested. Not interested.
Yeah. Thank you very much.
Hey,
all right. Thank you very much.